For centuries, it has been the world's most researched and debated subject. Yet, this area of study has been massively neglected and overlooked, leaving the world's Muslims and non-Muslims alike in the dark.
A lot of things are being discovered which the Quran refers to. So geologically speaking, astronomically speaking.
In this episode, we intend to put the Holy Quran under the lens of analysis. We will dissect some of the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt and the holy verses using the scalpel of modern science. Dr. Sheikh Usama Al-Attar is going to help me in my mission to answer some of the most significant questions of today. How is it that a 1,400-year-old book has left modern geologists and scientists absolutely stumped? What does Islam have to say about evolution and Neanderthals? And who was the father of modern chemistry?
The genius of this man is way beyond his time.
This is Inquisitor.
Not too long ago, actually, about maybe a couple months ago, I was invited to have a discussion or a debate where it was myself, and among the debaters was a professor of philosophy at the University of Alberta in the city of Edmonton, Canada. This retired professor of philosophy professes atheism.
Atheism has been described as the belief that there was nothing and nothing happened to the nothing, and then nothing magically exploded for no reason, creating everything. And then a bunch of everything magically rearranged itself for no reason whatsoever into self-replicating bits, which then became dinosaurs.
I got up and I said the following. Being a scientist, I worked on diabetes for a few years, and I've got couple of publications on that illness, especially with regards to the heart failure in diabetes. 4 out of 5 diabetic patients die from a heart attack. That's something that's documented. This means 80% of diabetic patients die from a heart attack. Their heart fails, heart failure. The question that, of course, intrigues science is why? A lot of research has been invested into this over the past decades. A lot of work has been invested, a lot of time has been invested. Conferences are being held internationally and nationally to discuss reasons why does the heart fail in 80% of diabetic patients. Let's say if at one conference, an international conference where you have hundreds of scientists and doctors gathered there to discuss reasons, to present their research, to identify the reason, the cause for what they call cardiac myopathy, where it's basically heart failure or heart malfunction during the diabetic state or diabetic individuals. Suppose a person gets up and makes a presentation and says, listen people, I've discovered it, I found it out. I think all of you guys are wrong. All this time that you've invested in this is just vanity. All this money that you've invested in this is just gone to waste. I really figured out the real reason behind it. And it is coincidence, chance. It's a random process of evolution. So why waste your time? I asked the audience at the university, what would the scientists, those doctors present there, what would their reaction be to this individual? What would they say to him? At the very least, if they want to be polite, they'll say, you've lost your mind. 80% of diabetic patients dying from a heart attack or a heart failure is not a random process. It's not a chance. There has to be a cause. There has to be a reason. Scientists normally try to study phenomena, natural phenomena, and try to understand why they occur and how they occur, either to enhance them, or to stop them, or to mimic them, or to derive a lesson from them, and so on. They recognize that these phenomena have causes. They don't just come out of vanity. They realize that these things and processes must have a cause, so they try to understand them. I said, if these scientists cannot accept that a heart can fail just through a random process of evolution, how can they accept, how can I as a scientist accept that this entire universe came into existence without a cause?
One of the big questions is the Quran the word of God, or could it be the word of man? Let's think about that. The Quran was revealed over a period of 23 years. Had the Quran been revealed in a single moment, it could have been argued that it was easy for a man to contrive all of the remarkable aspects of the book in a perfect manner. However, the verses of the Quran were actually revealed at different times over a period of 23 years, and yet it is absolutely consistent throughout. As for the remarkable aspects of the Quran, what do we mean? Well, as well as being a profoundly eloquent book, it also contains hidden mathematical secrets. For instance, the statement of 7 heavens is repeated 7 times in the Quran. The creation of the heavens, similarly, is also repeated exactly 7 times. The word day is repeated 365 times in its singular form, while the word days, in its plural form, is repeated 30 times. The number of repetitions of the word month is 12. The number of repetitions of the words plant and tree is the same, 26. The word for payment or reward is repeated 117 times, while the expression forgiveness, which is one of the basic morals of the Quran, is repeated exactly twice that amount, 234 times.
There is a book written by a French surgeon called Maurice Bucaille. In it, this French surgeon discusses and explores several miracles presented in the Quran. Now, being a medical doctor himself, he was really intrigued at the development of the fetus in the Quran. The specific, transformation of the second, for example, the semen interacts with the egg and the subsequent conversions and steps, and how carefully they're described in the Quran. This doctor was extremely intrigued by this and says, I have never seen something like this. And he concludes that it's impossible for a man 1400 years ago to have understood this, which we understand now only after the development of all the technology and the microscopes that we have that would allow us to observe all this.
The words man and woman are also employed equally in the Holy Quran, 23 times. And that's right, 23 is the number of chromosomes from the egg and sperm in the formation of the human embryo. The total number of human chromosomes is 46, 23 each from the mother and father. Human being is mentioned 65 times in the Quran. The sum of the number of references to the stages of man's creation is exactly the same. Soil is mentioned 17 times. Drop of sperm is mentioned 12 times. Embryo is mentioned 6 times. A half-formed lump of flesh is mentioned 3 times. Bone is mentioned 15 times. And flesh is mentioned 12 times. When you add all of these together, it adds up to 65. The words indicate each of the stages of human creation, while the sum of the number of times each of these is mentioned adds up to 65, which is the number of times human being is mentioned in the Quran. Morris Bukai made the following statement:
I could not find a single error in the Quran. I had to stop and ask myself, if a man was the author of the Quran, how could he have written facts in the 7th century that today are shown to be in keeping with modern scientific knowledge?
In fact, the Quranic verses are almost coded. Particular words which correlate in harmony or contrast one another, demonstrating balance, appear exactly the same number of times. The words world and hereafter are repeated exactly the same number of times, 115. The word Satan is used in the Quran 88 times, as is the word angels. The word faith is repeated 25 times throughout the Quran, as is the word infidelity. The words paradise and hell are each repeated 77 times. The word zakat, which means charity, is repeated 32 times, and the number of repetitions of the word blessing, barakah, is also 32. A deeper understanding of the Quran would reveal that zakat and blessing correlate with each other, i.e., giving charity increases one's blessings. The expressions summer hot and winter cold are both repeated 5 times. The words wine and intoxication are repeated exactly the same number of times, 6. The number of appearances of the word mind and light is the same, 49. The words tongue and sermon are both repeated 25 times. Reward and action are both repeated 107 times. Love and obedience also appear the same number of times, 83. The words refuge and forever, 28. The words trouble and peace, 13 times. Treachery is mentioned 16 times, while the number of repetitions of the word foul is also 16. As I said before, the book as a whole was revealed over 23 years. How then could the Quran possibly be man-made? For that to be true, the Holy Prophet would have had to memorize each and every word, as well as the number of times they have been repeated in order for all these numbers to match up, and that too over a period of 23 years.
Another example is God saying that the skies are held with pillars that you do not see. And Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam in one tradition says there are quote-unquote pillars, but you don't see them. Upon the discovery of gravity, we realize what this invisible pillars are, how gravity holds this universe together.
Furthermore, he mentions,
The orbital movement of the two celestial bodies is confirmed by data of modern science, and it is inconceivable that a man living in the 7th century, however knowledgeable he might have been in his day, could have imagined them.
the Quran states, after mentioning the sun and the moon, each one is travelling in an orbit with its own motion. Even after the Quran was revealed, early commentators could not conceive of the orbits of the sun and moon. The 10th century commentator Tabari could not explain this, so he said,
It is our duty to keep silent when we do not know.
Sir George Airy was the first to propose the theory that mountain ranges must have roof structures of lower density, proportional to their height, in order to maintain isostatic equilibrium. In physical geology, it is stated mountains are merely the tops of great masses of rock floating in a denser substratum, as icebergs float in water. Before this, there was no scientific understanding of mountains having a peg-like structure.
Imam al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi started teaching some students not just the science of fiqh, jurisprudence or theology, but rather general science such as alchemy. One of his famous disciples is Jabir ibn Hayyan, who sometimes they refer to him as Geber, Geber. He is considered to be the father of modern chemistry, and he is a student of Imam as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. His discoveries were so great and magnificent that he transformed alchemy from just being a myth or tools into rather a science that could evolve and develop things. About 60 or so years ago, in France, a conference was held titled Al-Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And the proceedings of this conference, which several professors, some of them from Sorbonne, other places, made presentations about the genius of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. The proceedings of these have been published in a book initially in the Farsi language, translated into Arabic language. Okay? And the title of the book in Arabic is Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam as described by Western scholars. Basically, they say the genius of this man is way beyond his time. Now, of course, they look at the Imam not as an Imam, an infallible human being, rather as a very smart human, an intelligent genius. But they say the genius is way beyond, it's centuries ahead. The things he said, the words he made, the statements and the discoveries given by him were not really proven or even discovered or unveiled until centuries later. So they were mesmerized at the greatness of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Today's science is based on the method of experiment and analyzing the results and making deductions from the results. This kind of concept was actually presented by Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam to Jabir ibn Hayyan, the chemist. This whole concept, we can say, that was introduced by Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam to Jabir ibn Hayyan, and Jabir applied it. And hence they consider Jabir as the father of chemistry, transforming it from being alchemy into actually chemistry.
Jabir ibn Hayyan was a prominent chemist and alchemist to whom over 100 books are attributed. These were only translated into Latin in the Middle Ages and thereafter spread widely to European alchemists. Without Jabir ibn Hayyan, modern studies of cosmology, medicine, biology, chemistry, geometry, metaphysics and logic would not be what they are today. When he used to talk about alchemy, he would say, "My master Ja'far as-Sadiq taught me about calcium evaporation, distillation and crystallization, and everything I learnt in alchemy was from my master Ja'far as-Sadiq." So not only does Islamic knowledge stem from this man, there is no doubt that Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq's unsurpassable knowledge in astronomy and medicine made these sciences what they are today. Indeed, even the creation of the universe is contained within these Islamic sciences. For example, the Big Bang. The Big Bang theory is a theory which entails that the creation of life, the universe and everything happened through basically a Big Bang. The theory was of course ridiculed at first, but modern science confirms it to be the most accurate theory when it comes to the creation of our world, just as modern science confirms water to be the substance without which no living thing could ever exist. Water, the mountains, trees, the stars, the universe, everything, once upon a time, was one single entity, unified. Until the 20th century, the view prevailing in the world of science was that the universe has a constant nature and it has existed since infinite time. The research, calculations and observations carried out by modern science has realized that the universe had a beginning and is constantly expanding. Another thing we wanted to explore in regard to creation is something which glares at us every time we turn over a £10 note: evolution. And in particular, who were the Neanderthals? When we trace back our roots, religious knowledge would indicate that Adam and Eve were the father and mother of the human race. Where then does a human-like subspecies fit into the history of the planet? And what does Islam have to say about this?
Islam is always in agreement with scientific findings. Or, I should say it the other way around. Scientific findings are always in agreement with Islam, Islamic teachings. And we talk about accurate scientific findings, of course, not the hypotheses. Islam does not deny the existence of worlds before our world, times before our time. In fact, even humans who walked on this earth before us. Our generation of humans started with Adam alayhi salam. And this has been even proven scientifically. When scientists analyzed the DNA, which is found in the mitochondria, not in the nucleus. The DNA in the nucleus is different. That's the one that undergoes meiosis or mitosis, and hence it goes through some changes. However, during reproduction especially. However, the DNA in the mitochondria, which is the organelle that is responsible for generating energy into the cell. It generates ATP. They discovered it contains DNA, but it's preserved DNA. So they actually traced back this DNA, and they proved scientifically that it does exist a scientific Adam and a scientific Eve. Okay. Now they claim, scientists, is because of natural selection and survival of the fittest, the progeny of this Adam and Eve survived. The rest, for some reason, just died. Okay, that's what they claim. So scientifically, we can say there is an Adam and there is an Eve. So religiously speaking, of course, we say no, Allah created them and they're the first in our cycle. However, there is a book called Kitab al-Tawheed by Shaykh al-Saduq, who died in the year 381 Hijrah. This is over 1,050 years ago. In his book, he narrates a hadith of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, where he says, before our Adam, there were people who walked on this earth. And this may explain the fossils that some scientists are discovering about people who look like humans. And these fossils are 100,000 years old, 200,000 years old. And we know that Adam is not that far back. Between us, if you think about it, between us and Isa alayhi salam is only 2,000 years approximately, give or take. Between Isa and Musa was another, let's say, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years again, and so on and so forth. But if we go back all the way to Adam, it could not be more than about maybe 10, 15,000 years at most, you know. So how do we explain these fossils? And that's where the evolutionists have used as a strong point that, see, this is not Adam. It could not have been Adam. Therefore, there is evolution. We say no. In Islam, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam explained it. There were other humans. They looked bigger than us, which exactly what the fossils actually describe. It's described in the words of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. Additionally, some of the scholars of Quran, when they come to the verse in the Quran where Allah tells the angels, I'm creating a human being, or I'm making a successor, a Khalifa, I'm appointing a successor on earth, they say, are you going to inhabit the earth, making it the one who's going to cause corruption and bloodshed? And the question that some scholars pose is, how did the angels know that the human being will cause bloodshed? One response, one answer, which is presented by Sheikh Nasr Makarim Shirazi in his Tafsir al-Amthal. One interpretation, there are others as well, is that they may have seen the previous generations that walked on this earth, and when they saw Adam alayhi salam being created from the same ingredients, they realized these ingredients caused bloodshed and corruption on the earth before, and therefore he will also cause corruption and bloodshed. So this tells us that Islam indeed confirms, especially in the madhab of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the madhab of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, through the teachings of the Imam salamullahi alayhim, do state that there was life on this earth prior to the presence of Adam. The atom was discovered in relatively recent history, composed of protons at the core, at the nucleus, which are positive, electrons, which are negative, and they usually go around the nucleus, and there are neutrons, which are neutral. Okay. These would develop what's known as a stable atom. Now, it varies from one element to another element, the number of electrons, for example, and how its architecture is. So that's definitely varying. You have some big atoms, some smaller atoms, depending on some factors. Imam al-Sajjad, salamullahi alayh, in a dua found in Sahifa al-Sajjadiyya, known as Dua al-Tasbih, glorification. He says, Subhanaka ta'lamu wazna al-rih kam hiya min mithqali dharrah. Glorified be you who know the weight of the wind, or the atomic weight of the wind. Now this is 1400 years ago. Imam Salamullah alayh knew that the wind is composed of elements. Wind is composed of oxygen, nitrogen, other elements. Each one of those has an atomic weight, and therefore wind has an atomic weight. Imam al-Sajjad mentioned it in a form of a dua and praising Allah who knows the atomic weight of the wind. Many centuries later came the scientists and discovered indeed air has an atomic weight, and they give the atomic weight of air, okay, based on the different components of the elements that exist in air. The du'as, the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt contain lots of this, and very few of it has been explored so far. There are so many treasures in there that are still hidden, and we have not yet explored them.
In the Holy Quran, the word land appears 13 times, and the word sea appears 32 times, giving a total of 45 references. If we divide the number of references to the land by 45, we arrive at the figure of 28.888. Now if we divide the number of references to the sea by 45, we get 71.111. Extraordinarily, these figures represent the exact ratio of land to sea on the earth today, i.e. 28.888% of the planet is covered by land, and 71.111% of the planet is covered by sea.